Hi everyone out there. So exciting to be here at our October 2nd District Community Meeting. We have some wonderful presenters and we are going to go ahead and get started. Our first guest is Nicole Armstead. She's our City Treasurer and she's going to provide some office updates. Nicole, thank you so much for being with us today, and just let Sven know when you're ready to advance to the next slide.
Hello everybody, how you doing? Hey, okay, so is this also being virtually broadcast? Okay, otherwise I was gonna put the microphone down, but you know, we wanna make sure they can hear us too. Okay, well let me stand to where I can make sure I can actually see this presentation, get behind this plastic thing. So, good to see everybody. And so again, thank you for having me again here, Councilwoman Jordan. And so I have been your city treasurer now, this is my 7th year. And we have been doing some things that are unconventional. We've been using the office to do a lot of financial empowerment, and we have actually opened up an office of financial empowerment. So I want to give you a little bit of history on what we've done, as well as where we are today. And I will also just say, as you are my employer and I serve the people, any ideas, any thoughts that you have that you would like to see me do, or please share. Email me, let me know, okay? So with that, let's get started. So in the City Treasurer's Office, we of course have our traditional duties. We have payment services, and as a constitutional officer, we actually do process the payments for sheriff's fees. So we have to do that for the state. We get audited by the state every year for that. And so those funds come from these offices you see here: Circuit Court, General District Court, Juvenile and Domestic Relations, the Sheriff's Office, even the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and then we get funds as well from Workers' Comp. And so we have that, and then we also, I like to say, we serve as a liaison to the city, because as you all know, we have our finance department that does the majority of the tax collection. So a lot of people reach out to us, because in most localities, it is the city treasurer. So I say we're a liaison because they're calling us saying, hey, what do I do about real estate? Where's my personal property? And so we're having to educate them, redirect them. So by default, we do serve as a liaison. So I do find it important to even be aware of it so that I can speak and answer some of those questions, even though that's not our primary function. I will say, on a sidebar, I'm also an active member of the Treasurers Association of Virginia, which is the majority of the treasurers throughout the state. And so we meet on a quarterly basis. I actually serve on their board. I'm actually the chair of the accreditation committee to make sure that the offices are accredited, that they have ethics statement, that they have a policy, personnel, just that they're paying and handling their payments in a timely manner. So that's one other thing that I do. So even though it's not the primary function, I think it's really important that I'm still aware of what the function entails and the responsibilities. And hey, if the city ever decided they wanted me to step into that role, in that capacity, I will be completely aware of what it consists of. So that's a little bit there. And so we also pay jurors for their jury duty, and I'm so excited that the General Assembly did approve to increase that from $30 a day to $50. So if you do get called, you get a little bit more. And then also, we are responsible for helping to those that come in and they serve as witnesses. They have to get their hotel covered, their travel. These may be things that you probably don't think about, but these are things that we actually do in my office. So we're helping to reimburse, and we work directly with the Supreme Court for that. So a lot of the state duties for the treasurer, those are the duties that I hold, all the state-related functions. And then, as I mentioned earlier, a liaison for finance, and then also we have a notary in my office. So free notary, if you ever need a notary, just we ask that you make an appointment to make sure that they are there based on whatever time you come in, but we have that available to you as well. And so we also have developed in the office, back in 2019, I was elected and started my term in 2018, we began the Office of Financial Empowerment. And so we began that with a board of volunteers that had financial background, legal background, to really find, okay, how can we help service our community? Because a lot of people may have needs, but they don't know where to go. We have tons of nonprofits, but when it comes to your financial space, how to manage your money, how to get out of debt, how to be more fiscally responsible so you can pay your taxes. That is what we really aim to do. So we have made some strides in that. We have been able to have the offerings made available. We've helped to make financial offerings available to the ambassadors within the city, as well as other areas. We have also done our financial literacy fair as well. We have our community resource navigators, and that is one program I'm really excited about because we started that, and it started right after COVID, and it was a solution because people didn't know where to go for resources. So that's been in operation since 21, and we have an average servicing of helping about at least 700 people a year, helping to redirect them, and the primary need that people have is housing and utilities, and really helping to redirect them. So that also started from our office. And then we also have, believe it or not, online resources where you can actually go to our portion of the city's site, and you can actually get some modules. You can see different curriculum on how to manage your finances. And then finally, we also have done some offerings for the Richmond Resilience Initiative, making sure that participants that are getting a stipend are understanding best ways to maximize their funds and to make that money really last and stretch. So I also want to just give a quick highlight to the Financial Literacy Fair because we've been doing this since 2019 and it's been really successful. We have had on-site counselors come. We've also been able to provide just resources and vendors from all around. And that also includes different workshops. We talked about different things like home ownership, credit repair, as well as estate planning, and helping people who are not thinking about what happens after we're not here and we all have something that we're leaving. How are we leaving our family? Are we leaving them to just be able to properly grieve? Or do they now have to deal with debt and figure out what's gonna happen and how are they gonna handle our affairs? And so just really helping people to think about a lot of things that we take for granted. And then I think also we, just to point out that this is supported by our leaders here in the city, as well as our council members and the mayor and such. And so these are just some of the sponsors that have helped us out and been a part of what we're doing over the years. And as well, as we provide financial offerings, a lot of them even come and they volunteer to facilitate the courses and the classes that we have, as well as we have others that even help to sponsor or provide in-kind donations when we have our financial literacy fair. And so what's next for 2025? You see a picture of some kids. It is for youth. So what we are looking to do, we did a pilot last year, and what I would like to do is to use my platform as treasurer, because when people think of treasurer, they think of money. But what a great way to leave an impression on our youth than to go into the schools and to say, hey everybody, you can start saving now. You don't have to wait till you're a grown up, because you're going to go through thousands of dollars in your lifetime. But where are you going to be when you're 50 years old, when you're 60? What kind of place are you going to be in? And just let them know that it's possible to start to save. And so I will say that it was so rewarding because we did this pilot and I was talking to the youth and I had a small class of 5th graders just to try this concept. And at the end of our conversation, I said, so what did you learn today? What's one thing that stood out to you that you didn't know? And this one young man in the very front, he said, he said, if. I said, if. He said, if. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, if. You know, the power, if I can do it. Like, I'm sorry, he didn't say if. It was the power of, I'm trying to remember, but what he ultimately said, it was a few months ago, and he said that it was close to that. But he was basically saying that it's possible. Like it is, it wasn't if, it was it is. It is possible for me. It is, it's just a matter of when. Like I can actually do this. And I remember that day I was like, you got it, it clicks. And so since we do have some offerings available for adults, what we would like to do is ultimately have the youth go home and say, hey mom, hey dad, like these are the things that I learned, let's learn more about saving, and just helping to start that. So if we reach the adults, we're reaching the youth, like a sandwich effect. Let's really help our residents in Richmond to be more fiscally equipped and able, and be able to be more contributing to our whole the growth of our city. We know we're on an upward trend, but so that we can all grow together and not leave anybody behind, but how we can all stand up. So we have that. And then also just in summary, I've kind of already said, but we have the Office of Financial Empowerment I'm excited about. That's been in operation since 2019. We have our community resource navigators that are still helping today. And you can refer people to them. The phone number is really easy. It's 646-MORE, 646-MORE. And then also we have the online resources available on the city's website. And then, of course, the normal state treasurer duties that I maintain for the city. So, in summary, and I don't know what is showing up on the screen, but that's my number, email, and we also have our deputy treasurer. She's not here with us today, but you can always reach either one of us, as well as we have our general office information. And again, there's the community resource navigator's number. So that is what's been happening, how we've gotten to where we are today, and I'm really excited for where we're going. And so as I said, it's not the traditional capacity in the treasurer's office, but I've really worked hard to make this office make a difference and a contribution to our city, because it is mandated by the state that every locality has a treasurer. So I really want to make sure that we are contributing, and I've always told the finance department that, hey, I'm here. If you need anything, any other ways that I can contribute and help, let me know. So that's where I am. I'll take any questions if you have any. And I also have some brochures at the door for you as well. Yes?
Maybe this is the finance department paying the utility bills? Is that's not you?
That's not me. So the question for those was paying utility bills. That would be finance. And I will say, I'm really excited, we have RVA Pay, so you can now pay things online.
But I'm just, I'm kind of new to Richmond,
Yeah.
and if I'm not mistaken, there's not like this whole online that's the utility department, the permitting, that there isn't like, sorry, but 2024 experience. When are we gonna get there?
And so those things it's a constant evolution. And with the city, I will say that our department, some of the duties are siloed. So the utilities is a completely separate department from finance.
I was really surprised how back
Right.
in the, I don't know, 90s.
It is a little siloed, but I'll even say for
But
some of
I
the state
don't know about the silo thing, but when I go online, I expect an interactive, experience.
Right, and
looking online.
we have made growth, because we weren't even able to do the online transactions like we have now. So this year we have made strides in that direction. So again, that is the finance department, but as I said, I do my best to be aware of what's happening,
Yeah.
because as liaison, I do get asked these kind of questions as
So,
well.
for instance, I was moving and I told them to stop service, and I still got bills for months later, and they said, we got your request to stop service, but no one ever inputted in the system. That just happened like 3 weeks ago.
Okay, and did you want to chime in?
And I do have something else.
Oh, okay, great. So I was just gonna say, you can always send those questions to our office, and we'll try and expedite them for you.
And it's never for me, it's for the people of Richmond. Like, I can always take care of myself, you know what I mean? But I do care about everybody else. That's kind of my thing. It's never about me.
Okay, great. And you had another question for our treasurer?
Are we teaching financial literacy in the schools about scams? There's so many scams out there. Just really, when you get out of school, how life really, interest rates, that's very important, arms and, balloons. I mean, there's just so much
There's
out
so
there.
much, right,
We
involved
really
in
need that
finance.
financial literacy in school, like even starting first grade all the way through graduation, and then they can help their parents as well.
Yeah, so the question, for those that may have not heard, are we doing financial literacy in the schools on a myriad of topics about
Yeah.
interest and all the different things to be aware of and scams? And so I will say that it is mandated by the state that everyone graduate with a high school diploma must take an economic and personal finance class. Now, it is up to each school as to what that looks like. So what curriculum they cover can vary. So that's one thing that we're trying to do within my office, is to bring more awareness and those things, and just having those type of conversations. And then even with some of the financial offerings that we're having. So I'll say that my dream is to be able to offer these type of educational seminars throughout the city. And I would even love for us to be able to find partners that will help us to create incentives for parents to even go to these classes. That if your parents come to these classes, then we'll put this much money in your account, just to create that incentive. So those are some of the conversations that I'm having right now, trying to build out that type of programming. But really, there's so much when it comes to finance. It is truly a universe of information that so many may not be aware of. It's so much more than just budgeting your checkbook. It is so much more than just, making sure that you stay in the black, but really being able to avoid those scams and being misinformed. So thank you for those questions.
Beej, did you have a question?
Indeed. And a comment. I want to commend you for going to the public school to educate the youth. But if my recollection of being 10, 11, 12 years old, 30 is really old. And so let them know that right after they get out of college, perhaps, it's equally as important to know what you want to do with those funds that you've developed since you were 11.
Right.
Because they will come in handy. I don't know many students who are not on a trust fund who actually have funds when they get out of college.
Yeah.
Second, your training program at the district level is perfect. Do you go deeper and into the communities, to the organizations, and actually put perhaps programs together for like the fans so that they understand, and maybe Jackson Ward or Churchill, get down to the people who might actually have a need?
Yeah, I love that question. So the question is, as far as making this curriculum available on the roots level,
Right.
really reaching the people. And I will say that we can. So I would say if anybody has an interest or knows of someone that would like to have a class, we can definitely connect you, because as I mentioned that slide with all the partners, they're ready. They're looking for people that they can provide financial education opportunities for. And it's even been to the point where I've asked them to provide curriculum on a specific topic, and they'll create it. So whatever your needs may be, maybe your civic association, please let us know. We would be glad to connect you and to have someone come and provide some financial education on the roots level. So that is definitely accessible. And for those that were listening, he had a great comment about when we speak to the youth to encourage them that, hey, think about your finances when you're 30. Because 30, when you're 10 years old, sounds really old. That's a really good point.
It certainly does. And Nicole, I just want to say, I remember when you first ran and you had all these ideas that you wanted to bring to the city, and it's always so rewarding to see that you were executing on that. Terrific presentation. We invited Nicole, and she had another engagement at 6:30, so that's why she's presenting first. Do you have time for one more question? It's 6:20.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Just a follow-up, if I could?
Yeah, please.
So I will share this with our community group, but you might want to also consider letting the community organizations know that they could disseminate this information into their neighborhood, because I found that at the community level, only the activists are out in number, and the rest of them are home, not knowing what to do. And so we have an email blast that we could get out, and so that would be a good bit of information for them to get out.
No, that's great. And I will say one thing that I would like to do is to even make this presentation at some of the civic associations. And so I think sometimes it's just finding out who's the president, connecting the calendar. So please, if you all have any in your community, please email the office so we can get on your calendar and I can come make the same presentation or a similar one. Okay? Thank y'all so
Thank you.
much.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. All right. Have a very good weekend.
Excellent. So our second presenter is Kim Chen. She's a senior manager in our planning department at the city, and she's going to give an update on the Cultural Heritage Stewardship Plan. Kim, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come share. I hope there were some flyers on the table. I hope you picked one up. And I hope I'm not presenting something new. We've been working on this project for about 2 years. The first year was spent really doing some very intense one-on-ones community level, then larger meeting outreach with the community, because this is a community plan, this is not a city plan. And to me, as a historian and architectural historian nerd, this is such a needed plan in the city of Richmond. It was called for in Richmond 300. We've got an amazing historic city. The resources we have here are unlike any other. We get compared to Charleston a lot and Savannah. We've got twice, 3 times, 4 times the resources that a lot of those cities that we think of as being historic cities have. What we've also tried to do with this plan is to move away from the traditional way that we think about historic preservation. That it's not just about the built resources, they're important, and the individual built resources are important. But it's also about neighborhood and community and how those neighborhoods and communities evolved, where they came from, and who helped create them. We do a lot of talking in this plan about what are the intangible resources, what are the stories, what are the things that we've lost as a city. So that's been a big focus of this plan and our community conversations as well. So what is a stewardship plan? We started out listening to the community. That was our top priority, was what does the community think that a stewardship plan or a cultural heritage or a resource plan, what do they think that is, and what does that mean to them? We've tried to identify and articulate those community priorities. What are the things that are most important? And in all of our conversations, it's been a very consistent dialogue. It's always come back to sort of a similar set of these are priorities, which is really rewarding. This plan is to create an agenda for future work. What are the policies that the city needs to adopt so that we can protect these resources that we think are important? How do we manage change? That was one of the biggest concerns that we heard across the board. And everybody recognizes that the city is growing, which is a wonderful thing. Nobody's saying that's bad. It's an amazing thing that the city is growing. But how do we do that so that we don't lose that identity and character that is so Richmond? And then how do we, as we're doing things, how do we measure change? You know, where is it problematic? Where is it good? This plan is also sort of rolling into, we're working on a zoning rewrite for the city. So a lot of the things that we're talking about through this plan hopefully will be reflected in the zoning rewrite. So that really becomes sort of base policy for the city. So we're now on the second draft of the plan. First drafts, I always say, are the things that you kind of throw at the wall and see what sticks. And there have been a lot of changes since the first plan to this second draft that's available. We've really streamlined the content and the organization of the plan so that it's much easier to use. From community comments, we've also clarified a lot of the language. For people like myself that deal with this stuff on a daily basis, it's, you know, I know what I'm talking about, but not everybody in the community does. So we've tried to be very careful about when we use terms that they're well defined within the plan. We've added big moves, which was something that came out of the Richmond 300. It's, if we can only accomplish a few things in the next year to 18 months, what are those big things that we really want to be focused on? We also wanted to look at how do we, from a positive perspective, what are development incentives that can help support preservation in the city. So there are incentives within the plan of how we find that balance between preservation and development. And then we've tried to really acknowledge non-traditional preservation. Things like community history, oral histories, things that, as I said, are no longer on the landscape, but we need to be talking about because they are part of our heritage and part of our culture. So the big moves that we've identified as part of this plan are, one, for the city to lead by example. City of Richmond owns a lot of historic properties, whether it's through the city itself or through our schools. If we're not being good stewards as a city of what we own, then how can we expect our citizens to be good stewards? So that's one of the big moves. Before we can really plan and say what's important, we need to look at the city citywide. So what are all the architectural and archaeological resources that we have in this city? There's some areas that have been very, very well inventoried and surveyed. There's some areas that we have not even looked at and thought about. So part of this plan lays out a process for doing that. This past General Assembly session, we got two pieces of really great enabling legislation. And how do we go about enforcing those and incorporating those into our city legislation? And one of those is a substantial penalty for someone who demolishes a building without the proper authority and permits within a designated city-owned and historic district. This General Assembly, they let us do a civil penalty up to twice the assessed value of the property. In the past, it's been a $200 fine, which you don't blink. That's the cost of doing business. So that's a really powerful tool. It also lets us create a tax abatement program within city-owned and historic districts. In the past, when we have been, the city can do tax abatements for preservation and for all sorts of things, but they've had to be citywide. This would let us do an incentive program strictly in city-owned and historic districts. And that's a really wonderful thing because, you know, there's a lot of investment in city-owned and historic districts, but by being able to do this tax abatement in those districts, it helps us level the playing field. That someone who has been in that district for a long time could take advantage of an abatement program that they might not otherwise be able to do. We're looking at other incentive programs to help support preservation citywide as well. And then the other thing is that we need to look at just our taxing and how assessments are done, because a lot of them are not favorable towards historic properties or historic neighborhoods. So that's one of the other things that's one of our big moves. So my ask of you all tonight is on the front page of this flyer. It's unfortunately very tiny and it's down at the bottom. The plan is online right now. If you go to the City Planning and Development News webpage, you will see the Cultural Heritage Stewardship Plan. The second version of the plan is now online and will be open for public comment until the 27th of October. So that's where you can really help us at this point, is please go look at the plan. Please let us know what you think about it. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. So you're making me think about the heritage that is right. Can you hear me? So you're making me think immediately of the heritage that's associated with the Jackson Ward community in particular. And currently there are two plans that are currently underway, the Jackson Ward Community Plan and the Reconnect Jackson Ward Plan. So for some possible ideas on what will happen should that community plan and the Reconnect plan be merged together to make a single plan and return the land mass to Jackson Ward, which is what the community is asking for, because it represents the soul of the community, and there are no price tags that you can put on that kind of thing. It's the seed money that would have been there in the event that generational wealth development was allowed to proceed, but it wasn't. It was taken away by the federal, state, and local governments and their agencies. So could you speak a little bit about how perhaps you might be able to look at the north side of Jackson Ward and see if your abatement programs would help that area? And then should the landmass go back, which I believe the planning department is considering it, from Chamberlain to First Street, then it may be a possible idea to have those original properties resurveyed and identified and the families communicated with, so that perhaps there's not a penalty, but more of a reparation for the family who lost all that money because of the land grab as a result of eminent domain. Thank you.
Well, I know that there's been a lot of research done as part of that plan. They went back to, I believe it was the 1940 census.
1950?
1950, and identified who was living in Jackson Ward at the time. And that information is all available online. So that's a first step in that direction of identifying who was there. Whether the land is given back or there were other reparations, that is so far above my pay grade that I wouldn't even want to begin to try to address how the city at large might do that. But the northern part of Jackson Ward is a great example of what's missing and what's been lost, and how do we tell that story. Most people don't realize that that was the upper middle class African American neighborhood, which is probably one of the reasons that the highway was put through it and most of it was torn down. So we are focused on how do we get that story out there, and how do we begin to tell that as part of this plan.
So if you could just, as a follow-up, let everyone in the planning department know that the seed has been planted
Oh, yeah.
now, and that perhaps the people above all of our pay grades can start thinking about it in terms of community
Mhm.
as opposed to other ways.
Right. No, I agree. I agree.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, I'm in the Carver neighborhood. Was it part of Black Wall Street? I've heard like little bits and stories about Black Wall Street.
That mainly applies to Second Street and to Jackson Ward.
Okay,
Carver was actually parts of Carver were part of Jackson Ward before Belvedere. Cut the community in half. You know, we look at the big roads that cut, you know, the highways that cut communities in half, but there were also roads like Belvedere, when it was put through, cut off a portion of Carver. Carver grew up more around the railroad and the industries in the neighborhood. And it was actually one of the sites of some of the largest brick manufacturers in the city that were building. The clay and the bricks from Carver were used to build buildings throughout the city of Richmond.
well, and I've heard of Sheep Hill, that the livestock used to go up Lee Street, which is literally
Mhm.
right there, so.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's some cool stories that, you know.
And that's one of the things that, as this plan is implemented, that we really want to get to is, what are those lost narratives and what are those lost stories, and how do we get those, you know, one of the things that we're trying to think about is what or where becomes a repository for all of this information. It should not be my desk,
Right.
which is kind of where a lot of it is living right now.
Museum of City of Richmond.
But, you know, is it the main library downtown? Is it, you know, do we partner with the Valentine Museum? Do we partner with the Black History Museum? They've all been partners as we've been developing this process. And so that's one of the things that'll be a future step, is how do we figure out where the repository for a lot of these stories and information should be?
I believe I'm correct when I say this, there's a lady an older lady in Carver, her grandfather used to run the sheep up Lee Street, so
Uh-huh.
that's a great oral history.
Oh, yes. No, there are a wealth of stories. So thank you.
Thank you so much, just. Did I break
Hello? Okay, thank you so much, Kimberly. And as a reminder, the call to action on this is to interact with the plan. If you Google Cultural Heritage Stewardship Plan Richmond, rva.gov, it'll take you to that site and you can review it, leave your comments, suggestions. It'll be open until October 27th. So thank you for all the hard work that you're doing on that. Our next special guest is our Chief Administrative Officer, Lincoln Saunders. Thank you. I don't think you ever are not working on behalf of the city. So thank you for being here today to talk about the RVA stay relief proposal. So I think all three of the people who are here and those who are watching are familiar that the city council is currently looking at two different tax rates, maintaining 120, and then there's a proposal to lower it to 116. The administration has put their full force of support behind 120, and they are also coming forward, which what we'll hear about in more detail tonight. Already been presented at other meetings, a program called RVA Stays. And the goal of RVA Stays is to balance the equity needs of the tax cut with the very real needs of current city operations. So I will let our CAO describe that in more detail, and then we will open it up to conversation and I will provide my own comments. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you, Councilman Durden, for having me today and for all your work on behalf of the city. And it's really great to be here. Again, I think last time I got to be here was right after we announced the plans for the updated Diamond District proposal. So it's great to be back. So, just kind of thinking about where to start with this conversation. Speaking to just briefly some of the administration's thoughts related to the timing right now of reducing the tax rate, because I think that's an important piece before we pivot to start talking about some of the ways that we would like to propose, that we are proposing to provide relief to taxpayers while also advocating to maintain the rate of 120 where it is today. The fact.
Sorry, Lincoln, we're having some technical difficulties, so Sven is going to hand out the handouts, so just be aware that the screen, unfortunately, the presentation's not.
That's okay, not a problem at all. So earlier this year, or let me start here. About 2 years ago, after several conversations with the city assessor, with council members who had been advocating for the city to tackle this issue for a number of years, we embarked on a collaborative effort with the city assessor, the city attorney, and our finance leadership to address what has been a many decades long challenge for the city of Richmond, which is that our assessment schedule, the calendar by which the city assessor does their reassessments, is not aligned with the city's budget calendar. Many localities in Virginia and otherwise would be working off of a completed land book when they are establishing their next budget. So you know what what the property is valued at, and you set your rate to meet the needs of the city's budget. In Richmond, because of I think some challenges many decades ago, our calendars got mismatched, and so in order to get them back on the same calendar where our assessment schedule aligns, where we are completing a updated land book when we are starting the process of building the next budget, council adopted a paper in May that will reset our alignment and have those two calendars aligned to be both aligned with our fiscal year, which is July 1 to June 30th. Because of the time it takes to put that into place, the city assessor's office is updating their software that maintains our assessment database, as well as just the planning and preparation that has to go into it. That's going to take place for the city in fiscal year 27. What that means is that in fiscal year 27, we are going to have a year where the city will not see any incremental real estate taxes coming into to help us with funding the city's budget. We're gonna be freezing assessments for that 1 year, so essentially pausing it and then picking it up the following year with a reassessment schedule that will then be aligned with the new schedule and calendar. This is gonna help the city in a number of ways. One is it's gonna enable us to budget on real, actual values rather than projections. We've been using projections for many decades, and it's one of the reasons why you see the city have larger variations in collections than many other localities. Rather than working off a completed land book, we might project it. This year, for example, we projected 4%. The economy with interest rates, inflation, not being sure where things would land, we had a fairly conservative estimate, and it came back at about 6.67%, I think. Again, that has a lot to do with the fact that we are doing a projection that requires us to, take into account the broader economic forces and things that we can't foresee for the next 12 months with absolute certainty, and things can change in that time period. We really want to be working off of an established land book, not off of a projection. So because in the future years, we're going to have a period where we're not going to see incremental revenue, that one budget in particular, we think that it's a particularly challenging time to do an adjustment to the city's rate. We need to be able to get through, from the administration's recommendation, we need to be able to get through that readjustment period, and then on the other side, be able to evaluate where revenues are against city expenses. The second item that is driving some of our concern related to a rate change at this point in time is that, as you may be aware, last year, the city council and the mayor administration adopted a paper that established collective bargaining for city employees. So last year was the first year that we actually were able to sit down across the table, and we bargained 3 agreements with 3 of our 5 approved bargaining units. So police, fire, and then our administrative and technical unit all were able to negotiate. We were able to negotiate contracts that council adopted at the, I want to say the end of May, I think it was, that they were ready to go forward. Those agreements are contracts with our employees about future wage increases and benefits that we are going to be making adjustments in over the next 3 years. It's a 3-year agreement. Current estimates would show that we need $25 million incremental revenue each year to fund those collective bargaining agreements that we've currently agreed to. And that's if negotiations with the last 2 units that have been approved and are now in negotiations with the city don't put us in a place of making additional commitments regarding salary and benefits for our employees. I think if there's one thing that we as a city need to ensure over the next many years is that we keep our promises. We make promises to our employees, we need to keep them. We make promises to our citizens, we need to keep them. If we make promises with the business community, we need to honor them as well. It's important that we follow through on our word, and what my comments at the council meetings recently have been focused on is just that I don't have significant confidence that we're going to be able to fund those agreements with a 4% reduction in our rate. We're going to need, we are currently projected to be about $25 million in deficit next year, without other adjustments taking place. So we will have to figure out where to tighten our belt in order to fund those services. It's not that the city's budget is restricting, but we've made commitments about shifting our funding into supporting our personnel and our city employees. And I think that's an important and invaluable goal, because we can't be excellent in the service we provide to our citizens if we aren't excellent in how we treat and support our own employees, because we want to be able to attract and retain the best. We've made a number of strategic changes that the councilwoman and her colleagues have championed, including updating our retirement system. We've transitioned to the Virginia retirement system, which is a much stronger benefit package for our employees than what previously we were able to provide in the Richmond retirement system. We've reinstated tuition assistance program for our employees. We've instituted an employee homebuyer assistance program, just some of the many things we're trying to do to move the city to being an employer of choice, where we can recruit and retain the best. So between those 2 factors, we simply are recommending that council and we as a city overall hold on making a long-term decision regarding the tax rate until after we get past the 27th fiscal year, when we've made it through our property tax freeze or our assessments freeze, and can get back into a place of regular budgeting and growth. But we also do understand and fully feel the challenge that many members of our community feel with, their own properties rising in assessments, or renters who are seeing rents rise and their costs go up. So what we are proposing through the RVA state plan is, we call it essentially 3 additional relief options that we can put in place to support our residents, and particularly to provide it to those whose economic circumstances need it most. Starting with our seniors. For many of our seniors, when they transition to a fixed income, as their assessments rise, that puts them more and more of a burden on a fixed income. They may not be in the same position that others are, where you'll see a raise at work that's coming up, that's keeping up with the cost of living, or a change in their job, hopefully promotion. Once you're in a fixed income status, every new cost onto your obligations each month or each year can present a real challenge. The city for many years has operated or offered it's a terrible name, older adults and persons with disabilities tax exemption. It's essentially one of the only areas where the Constitution of Virginia allows localities to provide relief based on the qualifications of the individual. Otherwise, taxation has to be equal. So whether it's industrial or commercial versus residential or multifamily, everybody has to be taxed the same. That's what the Constitution of Virginia requires. The only exemptions they get are for seniors, veterans, and persons with disabilities. So our existing program allows for individuals with household incomes up to $70,000 and assets of up to $450,000 to receive actual relief on their property tax bill. So they're able to, based on their income, qualify for 25, 50, 75, or even 100% relief on their property tax bill for that year. What we're proposing to support our seniors who fall into that category, where they may not fall below the 70,000 income level, but they are at an income where it's not obviously easy to absorb that increase in assessments. And so we're proposing that for household incomes between $70,000 and $125,000, we would institute the Richmond Freeze program. So again, if you're 65 and older with income between $70,000 and $125,000, you'd be able to apply and have your assessment and property taxes frozen essentially for as long as you remain in your home. There will probably be a recertification process where you re-verify your income, etc. But the principle would be that you would be able to freeze it and not see your property tax bill go up while you remained in your home. In addition to that, we also understand that many of our, we'll call it still working age homeowners and renters are experiencing that same pressure we talked about earlier, where rents are rising, and more and more of our community members are seeing that their budgets are housing cost burdened, and we measure that around where if your housing expenses make up more than 30% of your income, you're essentially classified as being housing cost burdened. That could be because you simply couldn't find something that was in your price range and had to rent somewhere with a slightly higher rate than what you realistically can afford, or an individual who has had to have a mortgage in their home, and now because of the rising assessments has pushed them over into that cost burden position. So for those individuals, we're doing the eligibility based on the HUD Section 8 income limits, and we're obviously limiting it to Richmond residents, either renters or homeowners that are not receiving other housing assistance like a Section 8 voucher. They would be able to qualify for up to $200 a month for 6 months to go towards their housing costs. We're also proposing that those individuals who are able to benefit from this would be able to connect into the financial literacy support that you heard from Ms. Armstead, whether that be through the Treasurer's Office or other nonprofits in the community that provide that financial literacy assistance or financial training, help with the household budget. But we also want to connect them in with our career services offerings out of our Office of Community Wealth Building. The idea behind providing an individual support for over 6 months is that we would want to work with them to ensure that they're maximizing their earning capacity. So if it's an individual who is needs an additional credential or access to additional training in order to qualify for a higher, income position, what our Office of Community Wealth Building does every day is help individuals and families across Richmond move up the ladder from crisis to thrive in regards to their income. So again, the goal here would be to help more families or households get to a place where they are no longer housing cost burden and get to a greater place of stability. The third relief action that the mayor and administration are proposing and council is considering is we also understand that that the challenges related to rising housing costs aren't just limited to our seniors and those with the lowest income, that it has impacted all of our residents and a lot of our businesses as well. I know the councilwoman has had conversations with businesses in the area who are seeing rising assessments as places like Scott's Addition just continue to be hot markets. And for the businesses, that puts a heavy burden on them when their assessments go up 20%, 30%, or even more. So we're proposing a 4-cent equivalent rebate for all taxpayers in Richmond, all property taxpayers in Richmond. And again, I think it's important to note that one of the reasons we are proposing the rebate is that it is a one-time investment or contribution back to or returning of taxes back to our residents, but it does provide us the flexibility to see where we are related to our budget and costs in the next years at the $1.20 versus having reduced the rate, and that becomes the rate that we're basing the future budgets off of. The 4-cent rebate will use 2024 surplus revenues and costs about $16 million as far as that's how much relief would be granted back to our taxpayers. I don't know if there's anything I've forgotten that you would want me to touch on, but that's largely, one more point I will make about the state plan, as you can see on this, is that while I've talked about the 2 programs, the GAP grants and the Richmond Freeze program that are newer, there are a number of programs that have been in place in the city for a number of years that are also part of our initiative and effort to help people stay housed and stay in their homes in Richmond. I mentioned the tax relief for seniors and persons with disabilities, which has been on the books for many years. But our eviction diversion program was something that was instituted, I want to say, about 5 years ago, and has been very helpful working with individuals once they've been served an unlawful detainer and are going to court and hoping to not be evicted and stay in their home. So we work with those individuals. Again, it has similar sort of requirements around participating in financial literacy, et cetera. But where we're able to essentially settle their outstanding debt, but have them on a path where they can sustainably stay in their homes. This program has really helped keep hundreds of, if not thousands, of families in their homes over the last half-decade. We also, over the last several years, have been funding the Family Crisis Fund, which provides up to $2,500 in benefits for those who have, again, this is a program that's meant to hopefully catch families and households before they're served an unlawful detainer. So if they've fallen behind on their Dominion bill, if they've fallen behind in their rent, we can provide one-time support of up to $2,500 through our partnership with the nonprofit Humankind to help that family restabilize, and again, hopefully be working with them to maintain that stability going forward. There's also additional programs around home repairs and energy assistance, but collectively, all of these programs are part of our effort to fight displacement and to help keep individuals and families in their homes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Saunders. Could you just talk a little bit to our limitations as a Dillon Will state, and as a city council and administration, we each year go to the General Assembly to try and get a LOOP program enabled here, and just, can you describe what that is, and do you think we have any hope of getting that passed in the near term? And how can people help get it passed?
I like that in addition to the question. So in Virginia, as a Dillon Will state, we are only allowed to do those things that the General Assembly has authorized the localities to do. Otherwise, all powers are held at the state level. I guess other than those that are held at the federal level. So We, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have the ability to tax at different rates based on the property use, whether it be, industrial, commercial, or residential. We don't have the ability to provide relief except in those ways that are outlined in state code. So the rebate that we're proposing has a very specific kind of structure and cadence in state code as to how we can do that, in what circumstances we can. But that is also why, as the councilman mentioned, we have gone to the General Assembly for as many years as I can remember to advocate for a constitutional amendment for a long-time owner-occupant program. So this would allow us to provide a similar sort of relief that I talked about earlier with the freeze program for seniors, or the seniors and persons with disabilities relief, for those lower income, be able to provide an abatement of a portion of their property taxes. If they have been in their homes for, a number of years that would be set by, city code, whether it be 5 years, 10 years, or otherwise. Again, we just, as we've seen the city change quickly, I think over the last half decade, if not more, we understand that individuals who bought their home at one price are now seeing that that home might be worth twice or more what it was when they purchased it 5 or 10 years ago. But their income may not have gone up, 100% or 200%. And so being able to provide relief for those who have been longtime occupants of their homes, while not changing the rate necessarily, would allow us to provide relief for those, again, who are longtime occupants, but also allow the city to continue to grow and capture the value from the new investment we're seeing, whether that be new multifamily or new homes in the city, or homes that have sold, right? So if an individual were to purchase a home on the market, the assessment would be aligned with, or their property tax would be aligned with the assessment, but somebody who's been in their home for 10 years would be able to lock in their payment so it's not escalating at the same rate as their assessment. And I'm sorry, to answer your question, I think the simple answer is that we need more advocacy for this at the state level. The General Assembly has, last year we saw a few members who we weren't expecting on the Senate side vote for the loop bill, and it actually made it through the state Senate, but has died in the House every year. So sending a note to your House representative, send a note to all the House representatives and tell them that this is something that will benefit not just Richmonders, but localities across Virginia.
Thank you. Another question that I had during our Finance Committee meeting, and perhaps at your last presentation to council, was, folks who are really struggling to pay rent or pay their mortgage, very often they don't have time to do extra things. They're barely keeping their head above water as it is. So when it comes to these extra workforce development and trainings, on the one hand, I completely understand the value of that, but I also worry it would prohibit someone from being able to tap into these much needed funds. So what does the structure of that look like?
Appreciate the question. I think when we were designing the program, our initial instinct was to make it a requirement that they would participate in career services at the Office of Community Wealth Building. Again, with the idea that if we're using taxpayer dollars to provide a benefit, to provide relief and financial assistance to somebody, we want to make it as effective as possible in ensuring that they participate in programs that we know can help them get out of their crisis position or cost burden position. Was part of the thinking there. But at the same time, whether it's a requirement or as the feedback has come in from council members, particularly around moving that to more of an availability of those resources, or in my mind, we can be strategic in making sure that we are proactively reaching out and encouraging folks to participate in those services and making sure they know what could be available to them. I think it could be equally as effective. And so I don't believe, I think when I spoke at the last council meeting, I was under the impression that we would have that as a written part of the ordinance. My understanding is that this is something we can adjust through the actual program requirements that are outlined in social services as we're establishing it. So based on the feedback that I received primarily from council, it seems that we're very likely to go towards the realm of, or the expectation that we will be doing outreach and encouragement, not requirements.
I think that would be great, particularly those first few months as people are trying to catch their breath and are benefiting from this income.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you so much. Do we have any questions from our audience? This is such an unusual meeting, I have to say.
And Sven always has a question.
All right, well, I will
Switch over now.
Okay.
I think this must be set so that no one asks a long question. It turns off after about 5 seconds. But I appreciate CAO for coming here, I appreciate everyone for being here. And just for those who will be watching this later on our YouTube channel, I really appreciate everyone who's reached out to us, whether it's been via email, phone, text, conversation in the grocery store. This is on people's minds. And certainly it's something that's affected my household. I'll never forget when my husband opened up our assessment letter. I think the last one was particularly painful, and I've never wanted to not be on council more than when he saw that our assessment had gone up. I think it was 30%. So the value of our home has gone up. I think it's doubled in the last 10 years. So I understand where people are coming from. At the same time, we also get emails, calls, conversations at the grocery store, texts daily about the need for more city services, more funding for our schools. Rarely do we hear someone say, stop spending money on something. That is a critical need within Richmond. So I will be taking all of the input that our office gets, as well as further examining these proposals from administration as we head into that vote on October 28th. So continue to reach out to our office. Thank you to everyone who watched this, and good evening.